Are we live? Yes, we are live. Today is Sunday, December 25th, Christmas Day. And just because it's Christmas, that won't stop me from doing my fifth episode of Boat Talk. And if you happen to run across this online, this is a live call in show where you can ask me anything about boats. I've been a captain for 6 years, 7 years. I've been boating for 11 years. I'm here in Florida. And the number's on the screen 727-201-3086. I'd love to take your call, and you can give me the hardest question you got. I might not have the answer, but I will know someone who does. So it is freezing cold here in Florida. This morning it was 36 degrees, 35. That is the lowest I've ever seen it in 11 years of living here. Right now I think it's only up to 44. And yeah, this is very rare. But apparently there's a huge winter storm going on across the country and almost everyone is affected. So I still feel pretty lucky to live in this wonderful place where it doesn't get that cold. I just realized I don't have my mic in front of me. It's way across the desk. So we're just going to bring that where it should be. I was wondering about what kind of topic I should do today. And I thought, I want to talk about long trips, moving a boat from, Florida to New York or the Virgin Islands or Texas. And I think I have a few things I can talk about on that. When I first started out as captain, that was my primary job, was deliveries. And so I did that for about 3-4 years before I kind of got tired of the sleepless nights, and it can be very boring. And then I had a girlfriend and I wanted to live with her, and so I stopped doing deliveries. I still do deliveries now, but mostly short ones. 2 days is about the most I'll do. The longest trip I've done, I wasn't the captain. Longest trip was 3.5 weeks, roughly. That was from West Palm Beach to the Virgin Islands, but we took our time, stopped along the way. As captain, my longest trip was 10 days, and that was from the Virgin Islands back to St. Pete on a catamaran. Both those trips were sailboats. I've also done the Virgin Islands by powerboat. I've done Bermuda. Bermuda was only, I think, a 5-day. We were moving slow on that powerboat. And I've been to New York a couple times, and that was about a 7 or 8 day. I think it was an 8-day. And then I've been to Texas. Texas, I think, was 6 or 7 days. Maybe I'm off a little bit. All right, enough of that. So I want to start off by talking about your crew. So a lot of people, a lot of captains that get hired to do a delivery. And by the way, the way you get hired to do a delivery, somebody calls you up and they say, hey, look, a lot of the times I bought this boat. I live in Virginia, and I found a good deal on a boat in Florida, and I work full time, and I just can't break away to move it myself. A lot of the owners of these boats are completely capable of doing it themselves. They just don't have the time. Some of them are not capable of doing it themselves, and they wouldn't dare take it out there, whether it be by themselves or with a crew. And others are right in the middle where they have some skills, but they want you to come along and they're going to learn from you. So it's almost a hybrid lesson delivery. So let's say you get hired for a delivery, Florida to Virginia. Okay, that's probably going to be about a 4 or 5 day, depending on where in Florida you're starting from and where in Virginia you're going to. And so what captains will do is they'll say, I'm going to hire a mate, or if they have a partner, they'll bring their partner and pay them or not pay them. And that's it. One crew member. I think this is the worst idea and probably the worst thing you can do on a delivery, because the way it's going to work, whether you think it won't, is one of you is going to be asleep while the other's awake, and you're going to have very little time together to socialize, and you're going to be alone for about 4 or 5 days. And maybe you like that. I don't think a lot of people do. People crave interaction. And so being alone for that long will drive you absolutely bananas. You're going to get off that boat and you're going to run straight to a bar and you're going to hug a stranger and drink with them and talk about anything. You're just going to crave it. Now you'll say, okay, well, I only need 8 hours of sleep in a day. So that equates to 16 hours of being awake. And the other person only needs 8 hours of sleep and they're awake 16 hours. Well, that's not really how my sleep went when I did deliveries. And you may be different. Other captains may be different. But the way that it would work for me is I spent, when a boat is rocking, it wears your muscles down way more than you might think. It's just sitting in your house on the couch, your muscles don't have to do hardly any work, and your body doesn't get worn down. But when you're out on the sea, in those waves, they are just beating you down slowly, and you need more sleep. So what generally people do is they'll do shifts. Whether if it's just two people, they're probably going to do 4 hours on, 4 hours off, or maybe 6 hours on, 6 hours off, or some maybe. Let's see. Well, I doubt they're going to do 2 hours, but it's probably going to be 4 or 6. So you're going to be alone. You're going to be miserable. And keep in mind, you also have to cook meals or make food somehow. And that's going to exhaust you too, especially if you're on a sailboat and the boat is leaning. It takes 3 times as much effort to make a meal on a boat that's leaning. You have to brace yourself for everything you do and reach up to the cabinet and grab your flour if you're going to make some fish. And it takes time. I would sometimes sleep, like most of the deliveries I did were 4 hours on, 8 hours off, because I had a crew of more than 2 people. And I would sleep those 8 hours constantly. So let's see, that's sleeping almost 16 hours a day and awake for 8 hours. My body was just so tired. And also, it helps pass the time. You're working, you want to be done, you want to get to land so you can go home and get back to your life. So if you sleep, it just helps pass the time. So I would often sleep about, well, I wouldn't say 16, because out of that time off, I had to make my meals and maybe there's a little bit of socializing, but I probably slept 12 hours a day. So how many people should you bring on a trip? Well, that all depends on how big the boat is. That's a huge factor. And how far are you going? You need a place, you need everybody to have room to spread out. So if you have a 30-foot boat, which is not that big of a boat, let's say it's a sailboat, and you're going from Miami to Virginia, you are probably going to only want 3 people. Could you fit 4? That'd be tough. I don't know if I'd put 4 on a 30-footer, because it's just not that big of a boat. But I definitely want 3. I never would want 2. You know, if your crew all were comfortable in tight spaces and you were maybe good friends, could you put 4 on there? Yeah, probably. I think you can make that work. I took a 49-footer. I think it was a Geno from Miami to New York. That was an 8-day, and I had a crew of 4. And I believe our shifts were 4 hours on, 8 hours off, and you always had 2 people in the cockpit. And so this is really important. I always want 2 people up on deck together. And the main reason is if one person falls off. Now you think, who's going to fall off the boat? Well, here's what I've noticed. When you are tired, and let's say it's the overnight shift. You're on the 2 to 6, which for me was the hardest shift. And it's 5 in the morning, you're 3/4 of the way through your shift, you're exhausted, and you need to go to the bathroom, and the boat's leaning, maybe you're in some rough waves, and it's kind of a lot of work to go down below, boat's on autopilot, you couldn't do this without, go down below and brace yourself and use the head and then come back up. So a lot of people are going to turn around, guys, are going to pee off the back. And then what if you hit a wave and you fall off? Take a second to picture the rest of your life if that happens. If that ever happens to you and you fall off, the first thing you need to do, and the only thing you can do, is scream as loud as you can and hope that it wakes somebody up on the boat. That is your only chance of survival. Because if nobody hears you and that boat gets even a mile away, you're dead. And you're going to have a very terrible last half a day, 2 days, whatever you can do, however long you can tread water. Because if it's at night, no one is going to find you. And I'm talking offshore. If you're in the intercoastal, you're fine. But that's not really happening in the intercoastal. We're talking offshore travel. The boat is not going to find you. I don't care. Oh, but I'm dropping breadcrumbs on my GPS. Doesn't matter. You will have drifted from those breadcrumbs by the time anyone finds out that you are gone and goes back for you. And also think about the height of your head. Okay, my head, I don't know, I probably have a standard head. I guess it's 10 inches tall. Okay, so a 10-inch wave covers me up completely. And 10-inch waves are very common, especially offshore. You're probably, it's pretty rare to get less than 10-inch waves, so they're not going to find you. That brings me to another point. If you ever are on deck alone, wear a life jacket and wear one with a strobe light, because that is going to increase your chance of getting found if you fall off. So obviously the point of having 2 people in the cockpit is they're going to make sure that if you fall off, they're going to go back for you. And if the boat doesn't have autopilot, they're going to relieve the wheel if you need to go get something. That is incredibly difficult to do, a delivery without autopilot and have someone on deck alone. I hope you're never in that position. I have done that, and I've only done it a couple times because I learned quickly. By the way, just a couple things. I know it's Christmas, but I wanted to do this show because, like I say every week, it's been 5 weeks now, I just want to be here every Sunday at 4:30, and I'm going to have a topic. I'm going to talk about it for a little bit of time, and the phone number's up on the screen, and if no one calls, that's fine. I'm just going to, share some of my knowledge. But if someone does call, 727-201-3086, I'd love to talk to you. Hit me with your boating questions. But hopefully one day Boat Talk will be a success. And I will try my best to be here every Sunday, 4:30 to eventually it's going to be 4:30 to 6, hopefully. For now, it's generally about a half-hour show just because I don't want to hear my own voice for more than half an hour. I don't think you do either. All right. So, I got a lot to say about long-distance travel, so I'm just getting started here. We talked about how many people we want to bring along. We talked about why we want to have 2 people on deck at all times. Oh, let's just talk about food. When you are meal prepping for your delivery, the longer the trip, the more intricate I want my meals to be. If I'm doing a 3-day, then I'll just grab some, a pub sub for day 1, some easy. It's been a while since I meal prepped for a 3-day. What would I eat? I'd get yogurts to snack on. Now, it's of course assuming the boat has a refrigerator, which most do now. Some of the boats that I delivered at the beginning did not. I would get some fruit. Don't believe the banana myth. If you Google bananas on boats, it will tell you it's bad luck. I don't believe in that, and I love bananas, and I take bananas on every multi-day trip. Man, I wish I remembered what I would eat on these multi-day trips. Definitely a pub sub, though. Multi-grain bread. If you don't get multi-grain bread, it's not the real pub sub to me. I'll get back to you on that if I can remember the foods. But what I'm getting at with this is, if it's a 3-day trip, you're hardly going to notice that you're eating boring food because it's going to go by relatively quickly. If you're on an 8-day trip, that tasty warm meal in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening gives you something to look forward to. And sometimes you don't have a lot to look forward to. There are huge stints of time where nothing happens. You'll get these tiny bits of excitement, like dolphins start running with the boat, or you get a thunderstorm, or the wind picks up. But most of a delivery is sitting there doing absolutely nothing. You're sitting in your own head with your own thoughts. And so that's when you should plan very well for, nice warm meals, rice and chicken and, whatever you'd make at home maybe, and makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel like you're at home. So the longer the trip, the better the food. Fuel stops. Is there enough to talk about on fuel stops? So on my New York trip, on one of them, we only had to stop for fuel one time. We were going from Miami, and we stopped in the Outer Banks. No, it wasn't the Outer Banks. It was south of the Outer Banks. It was still in North Carolina. And that is a really bad time to try to get a hot meal. A lot of people think, I'm gonna stop halfway there when I get fuel, and I'm gonna just take a moment to stretch my legs and get a meal. Well, that might work out at some marinas. It might work out really well. Most marinas, the fuel dock, they don't have room to hold your boat while you go off for a couple hours to eat a meal. So you would need to plan that ahead. And if you want to stay a whole night, then book a slip in that marina. But just stopping like you would on the road, it's not the same. A lot of times a fuel dock is a long concrete dock where they can maybe put 2 to 5 boats, or maybe more than that, but it is always limited on space. And if you say, hey, I just want to leave my boat here for a couple hours, the answer is probably going to be sorry. As you know, they probably wouldn't mind if they had the room, but they probably don't have the room. Because if one big boat comes in and needs fuel and you're in the way, they don't want to go look for you. Oh, where's that guy? We need him to move his boat. And you don't want to get interrupted. So don't plan on grocery shopping or getting a meal unless you've planned ahead and you're getting a slip, or you know that there's room, or you know that there's a restaurant nearby at least. I know I talked about sleeping on these long trips. I was talking about how I can sleep 12 hours in a day because my body is so exhausted. Also, your body is so tired and so exhausted that despite the fact that the boat is leaning and pounding through waves, and oftentimes there's some noise like pots clanging or something in the galley making noise, I personally sleep right through that. Doesn't bother me in the slightest. Now, if you do that to me in my house, I probably will not be able to sleep. But on a boat, I don't know what happens. I think it's just your body's so tired. I can sleep in the V-berth of a sailboat through a storm, and it just doesn't seem to be an issue. In fact, I sleep really well up there. Okay, and then let's talk about the owners a little bit. So when an owner calls me and says, "Hey, Captain, will you move my boat from Florida to the Virgin Islands?" I ask a few questions. Number one, are they going with you? If they are, what is their experience? Because if they have no experience, you need to make sure you have enough experienced people with you to help. And you can be straight up with them. You don't have to hide it. Just say, how much time do you have on boats? Sometimes it's these owners' first boat, and they just want to be there to watch and learn. Sometimes they don't even want to do anything. They just want to watch. So you need to clarify, how much work are you going to put in? Are you going to be like acting as a mate? Are you just there for the ride? Are you going to take helm shifts? So ask them that. Next, I ask if the boat has autopilot and if it's working, if they've tested it. You can even get new boats where the autopilot has an issue. So just ask them, does the autopilot work? That is like an extra person right there. Without autopilot, it's a much harder trip. Next, and very importantly, does the boat have radar? If it doesn't have radar, you can still do the trip pretty much anywhere, but you need to have a set of fresh eyes on deck at night, always looking for lights, whether it's you, the helmsman, or your mate. So you need to account for that and have enough crew members to where there's one person driving the boat and one person on deck being as a lookout for the entire trip. If it does have radar, that's amazing. Make sure that some of the older boats, the radar is down in the cabin only, and that's still better than nothing, but you want the radar in the cockpit. And you can also set up guard zones on the radar, on the newer ones. You can create this half circle in front of where you're going, so that if any other dots, a dot is going to be something either sticking out of the water or another boat or land. If anything gets in that guard zone, it's going to set off an alarm. Okay, so this is a good point. Why would you need an alarm to go off? If you're driving the boat and you're awake, you're going to be able to see whatever's on the radar. Well, you're not always awake. And here's something that I think is completely acceptable, while still being safe. You can sleep during your shift at the helm. What you need is a reliable timer If you're on a sailboat and you're moving 5 knots or 6 knots, which is about what most sailboats are going to be moving, and you're on autopilot and you are far away from land, if you set your alarm for 10 minutes, I would do 15 at the most, and you check the radar, there's nothing on the radar in front of you, and you know that you're in deep water, and you set your alarm for 15 minutes, and you put your head back and go to sleep for 15 minutes, as long as that alarm wakes you up, I don't see anything wrong with that. And the reason is your sailboat is going so slow, it does not have time to hit anything in 15 minutes. So as long as your radar is zoomed back and you can see that, okay, there's nothing ahead of me for the next 15, 20 miles, which radars should be able to easily do that, tell you if anything's up there, then put your head back and sleep. It's a really good way of getting through the night. I've done that many times. I'll put my head back, and it's really neat how the body will understand after a few cycles what's going on, and you'll be able to put your head back and fall asleep immediately, and that alarm will wake you back up. You'll look at the radar, you'll see that nothing's in front of you, you're still on course, and you're going to go back, you're going to set your alarm again, and you're going to go back to sleep. It helps with just getting through the night out of boredom, or if you're just so tired you absolutely need it. So I know some people won't agree with me, and that's fine. I've done it, and I haven't had an issue, and I haven't found a reason not to. Actually, so one time I did have an issue with it. The alarm didn't go off. Now, I don't know why, whether it was an unreliable alarm or if I forgot to set it before going back to sleep. So there's only one time out of the many times that I've done this. So probably was me, but I probably slept for an hour, which is funny to think you're on this really heavy bullet and there's no one at the helm. You're just asleep. But it was fine. I woke up and I just noticed a lot of time had gone by and that the alarm was at 0. I was using an egg timer, which is a great way to do it. So getting to your destination, man, when I arrived in New York, my Miami to New York trip, I did it twice on a Geno 49. And the second time I did it, I got in the biggest storm of my career, or my life, really. It was blowing about 55, I don't know, probably miles per hour, could have been knots. That's some strong wind. And it blew 35 for 3 days. And it built up these 20-foot waves. And if you know me, I don't exaggerate on wave height. These are real 20-foot waves. They were beautiful, but it was a little scary because we were 90 or 70 or 90 miles off of North Carolina when this happened. When the really strong 55 knot gusts were coming up. And there's nowhere to hide. You're just completely out there exposed. You know, all you want to do is just park the boat, wait for the storm to pass, and then keep going. But you don't have that choice. You're forced to deal with it. And that's a scary thought. But when we arrived at our marina it was the Sewanaka Corinthian Yacht Club in Long Island, it felt so good to get off that boat and get a beer and a hot meal that we didn't have to make. It is an incredibly rewarding experience. So you're going to go through some hard times, but at the end, it feels amazing. If your owner came along with you, then just make sure you collect payment and then tie up any loose ends. But they're going to know what happened on the trip. But if the owner wasn't with you, they like a breakdown of how the boat performed, and if anything broke, if you lost anything. Did the boat throw any alarms? So I try to let them know. I had an isinglass rip, and the owner understood, and he said, "Please leave the the ripped isinglass in the cockpit." So I left it there, and the boat performed pretty well. But I would say out of all my deliveries, the owner goes with you about half the time. And I understand. I think if I needed a boat moved, I would probably want to go along and learn as much about my boat as possible. So most of what I talked about is sailboats, but I do want to mention a little bit about power boats. Give me just a second. So I've done a couple of lengthy powerboat moves. One of them was the West Palm Beach. This was out of Stewart. So it's from Stewart to the Virgin Islands on a 44 or 48 Aquila power catamaran. I can't remember which size. And the other one was to Bermuda. That was from... we started in... I think we went through the Okeechobee. I could be wrong. I'd have to ask Brett. I think we started in St. Pete and moved it through the Okeechobee, and then we stopped in the Bahamas, and we swam with the pigs, as people love to do in the Bahamas. But the thing about his boat, his was it was an Aquila catamaran as well. That was, I think that's why he hired me, is because I had experience on that boat. But the boat that he had, the fuel capacity would not get us to Bermuda, especially at cruising speed. So normally it comes with, I think, 3 fuel tanks. You have 1 tank for each engine, and then you get an auxiliary tank, and maybe that was an option when you buy the boat. But anyway, he had another auxiliary tank added, and we had a bladder on the foredeck. A bladder is a fuel tank, and it's a soft shell, and works just like any other fuel tank. You can, whenever you're ready, pour the fuel out through a hose into whichever tank you want, and that sat on the foredeck in very thick plastic, sloshing around the whole trip, but it made it just fine. You cannot move a bladder after you fill it, so you better have it in the right position when you take off, because if it's covering up a hatch or some storage compartment, you're not moving that thing. It's way too heavy. And also, we couldn't go at cruising speed because we needed to conserve fuel, so we took that powerboat, which normally would cruise at 15, 16 miles an hour, and we went sailboat speeds, 5 miles an hour, which is why it took us, I think it was 5 days to Bermuda. So yeah, that's just a point I want to make. If you're taking a powerboat, please consider your fuel options, because there's nowhere between the Bahamas and Bermuda, and if you run out of fuel there, oh man, I don't even know what you would do. You would probably have to get on the radio and holler at some other ships. Maybe try to find something like a mega yacht, 150 feet, that would have some extra fuel they could give you. I just wouldn't know any other options. Can't call Boat US out there. Also, that's not the US. Um, well, if anybody's watching this, give me a call. 727-201-3086. I'm going to keep it live for just another minute. Uh, and then I'm going to wrap it up for today. The topic was long distance travel, just talking about long deliveries on a boat and what that looks like, especially for a captain for hire. Hopefully, you got some tips out of it. Uh, the most recent delivery I did was, oh yes, it was was it a Scarab? I think it was a Scarab center console with a cabin with triple 400 horse racing engines. And the guy wanted me to bring it through the Okeechobee. And this was a 1 day job. I kind of made it a 2 day because I optionally left the night before and stayed in a hotel, and then we left bright and early in the morning. But that boat helped me break my water speed record. I went 69.1 miles per hour, and that felt incredibly fast. But being a 1 day trip, that was a very easy one to prepare for. I was back in my own bed that night. But our delivery we started before sunrise. We were at the first lock when it opened at 7 a.m. And we were back at his house in Palmetto, which is just south of me, by I think 5 p.m. But it gets dark early here right now. It gets dark at like 5:45. So that was a very busy day of driving. So I love jobs like that. So if you are a boat owner and you need help going through the Okeechobee, or if you need help on something simple like St. Pete to Key West, give me a call. I'd love to help you. But anything multi-day, I think I'd pass. I don't have the patience for that anymore. I'm Captain Tyler Dayoun. This is Boat Talk. And I will be here next week and hopefully every week. I do have some trips in January out of country, so I'll see what happens. Yeah, I'll definitely be out of country on one of those weeks, but we'll see. Maybe I can make it happen from out of area. So, Boat Talk every Sunday, 4:30. Give me a call.